the Radio Today podcast with Jen Saderhelm.
Hi and welcome. In this episode, we look at GfK Radio 360 Survey 2, where there was less impact on ARN's KIIS stations in Sydney and Melbourne than many thought. Smooth 95.3 broke records for listenership, and CADA ruled the DAB plus roost. Steve Ahern goes around the ground and catches up with the various networks. And a tribute to ABC Sydney's James Valentine, who has died aged 64. GfK Radio 360 Survey 2 was released on Thursday, April 23, measured continuously from Sunday, February 8 to Saturday, April the 4th. Just for some additional context, Friday, February 20 was the last time Jackie O was heard on ARN's KIIS network. And Tuesday, March 3 was the day Kyle and the show was pulled all together. Kent Smallsy Small covered the first 2 weeks while also managing his own new drive and evening shows, and Mike Etheridge has been looking after things since. Despite half of this survey period now not including Kyle and Jackie O, the results for KIIS 106.5 and KIIS 101.1 were better than most expected. Sydney Breakfast was down 1%, but was still number one FM behind Ben Fordham at 2GB. KIIS Melbourne Breakfast increased. For the Gold Network, however, while Christian was steady in Melbourne and the most listened to station in that city, in Sydney he was down a further 0.6 to a 5.5% share. And despite a campaign to entice new listeners, the Cume audience remained the same. So it was a tough survey at the office for ARN radio stations. Steve Ahern caught up with ARN Chief Content Officer Kerri Elstub and Dave Cameron, Director of Content, Metro Radio.
Dave and Kerri from ARN, good to talk to you both for the first time. This Survey 2 of 2026. Give me your top-line thoughts first.
Well, thank you for having us to talk about ARN. Look, I think the top line thing I would say is, despite the turbulence, despite the changes, this has been a pretty pleasing survey result for us. I mean, for ARN across all our brands to have gained listeners on Survey 1, I think it really speaks to the strength of our brands.
Yeah, I think some really good audience numbers, Stephen. Good to talk to you again. And you've seen that nationally the Cume has grown over 100,000, which is really exciting. We've got a lot of people coming into our brands, and you'll hear a lot from Kerri and I in terms of rebrand and reset and new shows. But all of that is just a part of a new vision and a new strategy that Steve-O has put into place and everyone in the company has embraced, and it's a new future for us. And yeah, there is going to be some audience churn naturally, but we're excited about the future and the things that we are building. We are absolutely in rebuild mode.
Well, this is the first chat we're having with you, both of you. We all know why ARN wasn't able to talk last survey, and it's good to have you both on. But I want to understand your complementary roles in the programming and the strategy. So can you tell me about how you both interact together and what are your focuses?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dave and I have been together for about, 6 weeks now? What a 6 weeks that has been. So
Yes.
So Dave and I look after the Metro Radio content team. Dave is the director of Metro content, so KIIS and Gold, and leading those teams. Clearly he has an incredible history and knowledge and depth of understanding of radio programming. So that is where Dave focuses. His speciality is understanding audiences, understanding data, understanding what great radio should sound like. Dave focuses on that on a day-to-day basis. And me, I come to it from a, I guess you'd say, bigger, broader content lens, having spent my life in radio, television and digital. So I am focused on our overall content plate, which is, of course, radio, metro, regional, DAB, podcasts, iHeart, live events. So it's great to have someone to focus solely on radio. And I guess I would come across much more in a commercial lens, working hand in glove with the sales team and just in an overall strategizing and talent role. But I find we really dovetail really well together. I talk to Dave more than I talk to my husband. So it's 6 weeks in and no divorce yet, but it's going well, wouldn't you say, Dave?
Yeah, it's hugely complimentary, Steve, the way we're working together. We tic-tac on everything. Kerri's built incredible products from a digital and a vision point of view, and has experience in audio, and I've done the same, and we're coming together with great thoughts together on what we can do for the future. So I couldn't say it has been any more than a delight learning from Kerri, and, we're working together really well.
Over time, I'll talk more about those roles and the big picture strategy, but let's focus on Survey 2. There's some obvious questions I would have to ask. KIIS in Sydney is in share. It lost 1 share point in breakfast, but in Cume went up a bit. I read that as the beginning of the Kyle and Jackie O fans leaving, and a whole lot of other people interested in what's going on with the Kyle and Jackie ARN case coming to the show and seeing what's there, what's happening, what they're saying or not saying, and who's filling in. What are your thoughts on that perception?
Yeah, look, I'll dive in first if you don't mind. First off the bat, I really just would like to give a shout out to Brooklyn, Pete, Nat and Mikey, who have been absolutely stellar in what they have delivered, despite the headlines, despite the turbulence, to have to jump into a long-standing breakfast show and deliver how they have. And as you point out, a 1 share drop. Full absolute credit and kudos to that team and the work that they've had. As Dave, I know, will elaborate, we understand that this is a period of change. We know that there is turbulence coming, and we're prepared for that. But right now, today, as I'm in the focus, I really just wanted to, focus on the incredible work of not only those 4 people, but DB and the entire KIIS Breakfast team behind them, who are delivering under immense scrutiny.
Yeah, to be honest, Steve, I'm not even sure you can read too much into today's result, to be honest. I think, what will happen is there'll be an audience, wash over the next 6 months, and that is natural, and we will rebuild a relationship with what I believe will be a high level of audience that we'll be able to sustain in that market with a new approach and, some fresh voices, a new strategy, and highly commercial. You will see a bit of audience churn, as Kerri said, but I have full confidence that what we build next will be to terrific benefit for the company, for audience, and the shareholders.
And you're going to give me the scoop on what you're going to build next?
Yes. What would you like to know?
Well, is Chris Fade going to be in there?
And you.
I mean, suffice to say, we're always well advanced in our thinking, in our conversations. You won't expect to see any announcement from this company anytime in the short to medium future. But we are well advanced on what the future looks like and how we will continue to grow the KIIS brand out.
Let me turn to Melbourne KIIS then, because I feel there's an immediate opportunity there. I mean, clearly the networking of the successful Sydney Kyle and Jackie O show into Melbourne didn't work. Worth a try, didn't work. The momentum is broken. There must be thoughts in your head to quickly get a local Melbourne breakfast show back on KIIS.
We're not doing anything quickly. We'll take the right decisions with the right approach for long-term strategy. I will say this, you've absolutely seen the bottom of that brand in this market, and you are yet to see the top of that brand in this market. We will reconnect it back to the market as it should be, and it'll be connected through highly likely its own breakfast show. But that will be for announcements in, the medium future. Nothing's being rushed here. We're thinking about the strategy in totality for this company.
Fair enough. Gold, it continues to be a powerhouse in Melbourne. Although there was a fractional slip in breakfast, I'm wondering if, because he has to deal with a national audience, Christian O'Connell's taking his eye off the Melbourne ball just at the beginning of the footy season, talking of balls. Where's the weakness?
You and I both know that, a tiny variance of point whatever it was is not any kind of change in strategy for Christian. Let me say something. Christian owns this market. Christian is loved in this market, and it is a number one station, a number one show, a number one workday, and a brand new number one drive with Jonesy and Amanda. You couldn't get a stronger station in Australia than Gold right now in Melbourne. And so, any slight variation in point whatever is nothing to do with a content strategy from this guy that is well loved in Melbourne and soon to be well loved in Sydney, because as you can see, the cume in Sydney is gone up a little bit, and now people will start spending more time.
I mean, this has been a stellar survey for Gold. I mean, as a brand, it's the highest reach the Gold Network has ever had, and I think it's 10 surveys in a row that Gold Melbourne has been number one. So Gold is doing incredible work. Christian is only going to continue to build.
Biggest reach, so 1.265 million. I see that Cume we're talking about, I see that it went up 21,000. And if you look at it as a network, there's an increase in Sydney as well, 792,000, and then around the country.
It's a number one format, Steve. I mean, it's a number one format globally, and the great thing is that Gold owns that format in Australia. You'll see some incredible growth coming from Christian through Sydney soon, but you're seeing just such an amazing station that is so rock solid in Melbourne right now.
Yes, it is. And you mentioned Jonesy and Amanda. Again, what I would call a weakness in Sydney. Obviously, you've changed the breakfast show, so the Sydney audience will have to grow with Christian. But in Sydney, Jonesy and Amanda brought their audience to their new time slot and continuing to build it on Drive, and also a very strong arrival in the Melbourne market on Gold in Drive.
Yeah, so Jonesy and Amanda in Sydney is above station average. I think that shows you that the audience are still there, have moved with them, and are loving their new show. And what I will say, and I think Kerri will also say too, Jonesy and Amanda are actually loving, reframing their show in a different day part as well. Absolutely loving it. They're well settled, and they've had astronomical figures in Melbourne, and they are delivering one of the strongest day parts on Sydney.
Oh, completely. They have settled into that slot. The new pace that they've got an incredible team around them. The figures are already there. And, there's a reason why they've been doing this for 20 years together. They are one of the best acts in town. We're pleased with a solid and stable result today. We know that there is turbulence and churn coming, but Dave and I and the entire team we work with are firmly focused on what the future of ARN looks like. And again, wish we could tell you and give you exclusive right now, Steve can't, but we're taking our time to make the right decisions for ARN.
Good on you. Well, thanks for talking to Radio Info and Radio Today.
Most of the other networks had ups and downs. The most extraordinary result was for Smooth 95.3 and Bogart Torelli, who hosts Breakfast in Sydney. Wow, it was equal top station in the city with 2GB, but the Cume figures were even more remarkable. In fact, the highest for Smooth ever. Nearly 1.5 million in Sydney listening and 730,000 to Breakfast. Steve Ahern spoke to a very happy head of programming, Peter Clay.
Well, the Cumes are going really well for Smooth. I was very excited this morning running around trying to find out whether this actually was a record result in Sydney radio, 1.448 million. This is a huge number. I did find a station that actually beat us slightly, I think by 8K. However, to get that Cume on Smooth Sydney, and thinking back to where we started with 275,000 listeners, it just shows the growth of Smooth and where we've gone with this product, and that the listeners are absolutely enjoying it. We thank our loyal listeners. They've stuck with us, and hopefully we'll gain some more and beat that record Cume in this market.
Jason Lauren, too, are the most listened to breakfast show in Melbourne for Nova 100. Perth's Nova 93.7 is top there, and it was a good comeback for Nova in Brisbane. Right behind Jason Lauren in Melbourne were Fifi, Fev and Nick on SCA's The Fox FM. The last two surveys have been exceptional for that station. Even better, Triple M in Sydney and Melbourne gained ground, and then number 1 in Brisbane and Adelaide. SCA's Head of Broadcast Content, Matthew O'Reilly, has more.
So firstly, pleasing result for us all round. And I guess the most pleasing thing from our content team is the areas that we've applied our attention to are the areas we're seeing results. And they are, the audience that matters, the 25 to 54 demographic, our Sydney and Melbourne stations, with all 4 of them going up, both 10 plus, 25, 54, breakfast and workday. And then also the revitalisation of the HIT network. We sort of changed the sound of that network in about August last year, and we're starting to see really across the board the effects of that. We've dominated that audience that matters with a 37.1% commercial share. We saw 9 of our 10 stations have QM increases, which we have to put some of that down to the integration and promotion we are getting from our new friends at Channel 7. We've got number 1 stations in Brisbane and Adelaide, and as I said before, the 4 stations in Sydney and Melbourne seeing an increase is really pleasing to us, particularly Sydney. Would we like more growth? Absolutely. Are we happy with that for now, and will we be patient? Yeah, we will. So it's really pleasing to see Today FM up a point across the last 2 surveys. That's Brekkie and Station. Brekkie QM lift today of 44,000 for Today FM, which equates to about 14% audience increase. And then at Triple M, we've seen the Triple M breakfast show beat Gold or WS from 6 till 9 for the first time since 2021. So all in all, a really sort of pleasing day for us.
Do you think you're benefiting by the instability in the breakfast time slot, particularly in Sydney and also in Melbourne, for that matter?
Yeah, I think we will benefit. I don't think it's we've seen the effects of that at this point, though. There was only a slight dip for KIIS and Kyle and Jackie O today, but there are 3 heritage shows that have left this market in the recent past 2 or 3 months in Kyle and Jack, Fitzy and Whippo, Jonesy and Amanda. So there is still going to be a lot of audience transitioning to new shows, and I don't think we've seen the full effect of that yet. I think Kyle was on for half of this survey. I think survey 3 to 5 is going to be really interesting this year, and we'll see where it lands.
Lastly, Nathan Emma on Today FM Sydney had among the biggest QM growth. Unfortunately, the network decided this week to play it safe and retweak their format away from the hits before they hit, which across Survey 1 and 2 seem to be getting somewhere. But Nathan Emma are working hard to be seen in Sydney, and perhaps this tweak won't affect them. For the ACE Radio Network, while Barbecue Bob on Brisbane's 4BH dropped just a little from the heady heights of an 11.2 last survey, the station itself moved from 4th to 3rd in the city, overtaking B105. Metro Content Director John Vertigan had this to say.
Very happy with what's happening in the Brisbane market, with their appetite for classic hits still rather evident. Number 1 40 plus in the market, number 1 10 plus on the weekends. And once again, 10 plus, we've knocked off a couple of the FM powerhouses in B105 and Nova. TSL down a fraction, but 19,000 up in QM, so that augurs well rolling into Survey 3. And really, we were 0.2 off being the number 2 station in town. And for a little AMer, we're more than okay with that.
SEN is already seeing the benefits of the starts of the NRL and AFL seasons. And for 9, Ross and Russ and 3AW were clear top of the pack in Melbourne. But in Sydney, it was even better for the new owners, the Laundy family. 2GB was up in every day part and weekends. Ben had a 16.8% breakfast audience share. Mark Levy might be second behind the mighty Smooth, but he was also up 1.2 to 15.2% himself. Steve spoke with 9 Radio Head of Content Greg Burns about a pretty good day at the office.
Greg Burns, Survey 2 for 2026, the last one under the title 9 Radio. How did your stations perform?
Steve, stunning. We feel today, stunning results across the board. Big gains, network QM, a big surge in streaming year on year, 30-odd%. Station-wise, 2GB breakfast, 2GB mornings, 2GB afternoons, some of the best results there in 4 odd years at the height of COVID. QM and share across the board, up in consecutive surveys across 2GB. 2GB number one, Ben Fordham is number one. Ross and Russ, Tom Elliott, number one in Melbourne on 3AW. 3AW, number one overall. Number one football overall, although it is early in the season. In Brisbane, 4BC, growth in cume and share. Number one talk in mornings, number one talk in afternoons in Brisbane. TSL and streaming growth also in Brisbane off the back of big changes at the beginning of the year, so that's really pleasing. And then in Perth, there were big gains in Survey 1, and 6PR has today held on to them. Again, a great result. Football and streaming are both up in Perth. TSL, best result in over a year, and the best share result in mornings with Simon Beaumont in 2 years. So across the country, we're really pleased, Steve, and wonderful recognition for the program team.
DAB Plus results had CADA clear number one in Sydney, Gold 80s in Melbourne, and Smooth was number one in Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth. The new Heart network is chugging away nicely. There were some drops to supermarket radio, which I wondered was indicative of people being more conscious of their time shopping with the significantly increased price of fuel. And the cumes, beyond what I've already mentioned, were largely forgettable results for the ABC. There were significant losses in Sydney and Melbourne and their breakfast shows. The one bright point was ABC Perth and Mark Gibson, who bucked the trend and had the second biggest growth in breakfast in that city behind Mix 94.5's Pete and Kimber, who started this year in fine form now that they've reverted back to a duo. I wanted to pay tribute to much-loved ABC Radio Sydney and ABC Jazz presenter James Valentine, whose death was announced as we were preparing for survey results to come in. He was 64. James had stepped back in March 2024 from his roles after being diagnosed with cancer of the esophagus. He returned that August before having to step away again twice in 2025 following return of the omentum cancer. His family said in a statement, James passed peacefully at home surrounded by his family who adored him. Throughout his illness, James did it his way, which lasted all the way until the end when he made the choice to do voluntary assisted dying. Both he and his family are grateful he was given the option to go out on his own terms. He was calm, dignified as always, and somehow still making us laugh. Speaking to Hamish McDonald on the ABC when the news was announced, longtime friend and colleague Richard Glover said that James was a yes and person rather than a no but person. If you get a chance, James's podcast Headroom, which was reflective of those values Richard was talking about, is available on ABC Listen. James was witty, whimsical, smart, and he made you feel like you were smart and worthy too. I wanted to wrap up with just a snippet of James on sax on the Absent Friends hit I Don't Want to Be With Nobody But You with Wendy Matthews on vocals.
Rock me in your arms like I know you can. Rock me in your arms like I know you can.
Valet James Valentine. Great loss to the broadcast and music industries. And that's it for today. I'll catch you next time.
Radio Today with Jen Sederhelm. Find more at radiotoday.com.au.
radiotoday.com.au